Anxiety is a mechanism our brains use to ensure that we are prepared for an upcoming problem, where we may need to switch into the fear's emergency system: freeze, flight, and fight. When anxiety works correctly, this is a good thing. It helps us be alert and prepared and able to switch modes effectively. When anxiety misfires, though, we are either stuck in the anxiety mode for too long or have an anxiety attack. We have covered anxiety in a whirlwind tour earlier, link below. Today, we are going to talk in more detail about the general anxiety feeling. That is, the anxiety that you may feel at a general level and the frequent anxiety attacks that may occur. Welcome to Joshua Davidson Therapy. I am Joshua. Some specific anxieties can be social, where you're anxious around people; phobic, where you are anxious around a specific thing; or traumatic, which is anxiety regarding an experience and events that remind you of that experience. General anxiety, on the other hand, describes how someone can feel anxious in most places, whether it be in the privacy of their own home, or at work, or at school, or in a peaceful park, or in a crowd. The feeling of anxiety is independent of the location and often independent of the people. If you're feeling generally anxious and it is a recent phenomena, then you are likely experiencing a reaction to a recent crisis or responding to circumstances of stress such as changes at work, disharmony at home, and so on. It is important to both do something about the anxiety you are experiencing and the crisis or situational event that is driving that anxiety. If you have had general anxiety for a long time, though, and it seems independent of a situation that you are in, then you may have a condition called general anxiety disorder, often shortened to GAD or GAD. This is not a diagnostic tool, just a way for you to help tell the difference between general anxiety disorder, and another anxiety condition. General anxiety feels like a pervading expectation of something going wrong, and you always feel on the alert. This can feel like an unspecified premonition or a dark foreboding, or just never calming down and relaxing. Sometimes you're worried about a specific thing, but it has a low probability of occurring, or a low probability of it being actually a big problem. Or you just can't put your finger on the specific problem, but it's vaguely about that. Reasons versus post-justification. It is important to recognize the difference between a reason to be anxious and an anxiety feeling we've just post-justified. To be blunt, we humans are often terrible at recognizing when we have an out-of-place feeling. We will frequently have an emotional response that we can carefully justify with poor logic and mistake that justification as the trigger or the reason. Consider this analogy. You've decided to purchase milk for breakfast tomorrow. Naturally, you go to the store. Upon leaving the store, you have both milk and a candy bar. The milk was planned, but the candy bar is a spontaneous purchase. We humans will be tempted to explain that we also wanted the candy bar before we went in, or that perhaps we noticed our blood sugar level was a bit low, or some other logical seeming justification for why we purchased the candy, other than that it was placed there carefully by the store to inspire impulsive purchases. We don't like to admit we got tricked. We like to think that we are rational and logical creatures. We like to be able to trust our brains. Sometimes our own mind is tricking us. Sometimes our emotions do this. We have a brain fart, we feel anxious, then we look for a reason to be anxious. We don't want to admit it was a false alarm. It is far more comfortable than to believe the post-justification we came up with and that it is real than to accept that we were wrong. A brain fart is where for some reason your brain does something odd for no good discernible reason. The hindbrain and false alarms. The false alarm comes from our hindbrain. Its job is to look at the world and work out our best survival strategy. The hindbrain is a poor communicator and has only two direct ways of telling the rest of the brain what is going on: a feeling and a sense of urgency. The feelings it uses are joy, fear, anger, sadness, disgust, or surprise. The emotion will have a strength component that we will interpret as an urgency, from mild, medium, high, and it's an emergency. The hindbrain triggers indirect communication by telling your body to get ready for the freeze, flight, and fight reflex, which will release a bunch of chemicals into your bloodstream. Your forebrain, checking the bloodstream, will then try and guess what the problem is, hence the post-justification. The stronger the urgency, the less capable we are to think clearly. We become reactive. Our fear reflex response is tied in with both the fear feeling and the anger feeling, where fear triggers more flight and anger triggers more fight. The state of alertness and preparedness before action is necessary is anxiety. Upon the detection of danger, our brains will give us some default actions, just in case we have no time to consider a better option. The last thing we want to be doing in an urgent emergency is to slowly plod our way through to a solution. We just don't have time. If our hindbrain actually detected a danger, then this is exactly what we want it to do. If, on the other hand, it is a false alarm, this can be uncomfortable, embarrassing, or debilitating. It can cause a panic attack, the feeling of, that makes it really hard to think clearly. From our hindbrain's perspective, it is better to give you an embarrassing false alarm than to miss a danger that is actually there, which could risk our lives. Our hindbrain is all about survival, so if you survive, its job is successfully done. Don't blame your hindbrain for false alarms. It's doing the best it can, okay? It's just trying to help, even if it is a bit over-enthusiastic. If you don't have a history of false alarms, it is fair to assume that your hindbrain has warned you of an emergency in good faith. If you have a history of false alarms, then it is time to start getting skeptical about those signals. As an analogy, consider an over-eager smoke detector in the kitchen. You definitely want the smoke detector to let you know when there is a fire. However, if it repeatedly goes off because you're making toast, you're likely to become a little skeptical of it and respond more slowly. If it starts to go off when you looked at the bread loaf, it is time to get really jaded about it. Ideally, you'd replace the smoke detector with a better working one. This is kind of hard to do with our hindbrain. We just don't have the medical knowledge to do that yet. While we can't replace it, we can train and tune it. Training the hindbrain is a three-part process. We've got to recognize that it is a false alarm. We've got to calm our system down so that we can think again. And then we need to deliberately plan and implement an action. Tuning the hindbrain may require both medication and allowing yourself to sit in discomfort. We mentioned medication earlier in regards to PRN medication. While it is nice to be able to retrain our brain without medication, it is also unfair to demonize medication as part of a possible strategy. Some people will need medication. That may be temporary medication or long-term medication. Medication can be used to override a runaway anxiety response and stave off an anxiety or panic attack, where slowing down and calming down without medication is not effective enough. This is generally done via PRN medication, as we discussed earlier, scripted by your health professional. Medication can also be used to bring a daily calmer state, which can help a person to manage a recent and ongoing situational crisis. When the crisis is over and the situation resolved, the medication support is generally no longer needed. Therapy can help you resolve these situational crises and events. There are also situations where it is identified that ongoing medication is required. At this point, general anxiety has the word disorder added to it, and it is generally not a response to a stressful or temporary situation. Ongoing medications are most commonly in the SSRI class or SNRI class. SSRI means selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. SNRI means serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. Generally, they are giving you greater access to your own neurotransmitters, the biological chemicals your brain uses to transmit signals, two of the thinking chemicals. When these medications are prescribed on a lifelong basis, it is easy for people to feel stigma about needing daily medication to be okay. We do not stigmatize people taking heart medication or diabetic medication to be okay, nor do we stigmatize people for using glasses to read or drive. Similarly, we should not stigmatize people for taking brain medications. Brain medications are not prescribed because people are weak or amoral or lazy. They are prescribed for genuine medical conditions. Conclusion. This is a very brief look at general anxiety and general anxiety disorder, a type of ongoing unexpected anxiety you can feel for no specific reason. We've taken a look at some of the things you can do to address this, both in actions and medications. This is not medical advice or therapy, but it can be used to help you to get an idea of what might help. If you are struggling more than this can help, please go and talk to your doctor or therapist.